Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name is Andy Jarvis. I am the host of the show and I'm the Strategy Director at Eximo Marketing. Today I'm joined by Ian Forrester and Ryan Clarke, the CMO and Head of Ecommerce for STATSports. They're a B2B company that track performance data for professional athletes, and they also have a direct-to-consumer element where they sell the same tracking software to consumers and you can track your performance against the pros. It's a hell of a business based here in Northern Ireland, in Newry, and selling across the world with market-leading software. You don't need me to tell you about it. Why? Because Ian and Ryan are going to do a much better job than that, and here they go. So let's get straight on with the episode. Today, I'm welcomed by Ian and Ryan from STATSports. How are you doing, chaps?
Good. Doing very good.
Excellent stuff. So first of all, let's get in. What is STATSports and what do you do? I think most people who might know anything about the product will remember the Euros. Ukrainian fella takes his shirt off, runs around wearing a sports bra. That's you guys, isn't it?
Essentially, yeah, but there's a little bit more to it than that, unfortunately. So, in a nutshell, what are we? We are a performance analysis company. So what we do is we have a pod that sits in the back of that vest that records lots of physical data, 5 million points per every 90 minutes games of football, and then that is then produced through various devices like iPads, phones and desktops to sort of give software analysis on it and data analysis. So we're essentially providing human physical data to elite sports teams and beyond, just to sort of know what their players are doing, etc.
So as someone whose undergrad degree was in, it was supposed to be in sports science, but I ditched that bit because I struggled with the science bit and went into the management and marketing element. But the one thing I learned back in 1998, other than the fact TVs were still black and white back then, was that elite sport and the science and the data behind that wasn't elite. It was in the dark ages, effectively, wasn't it? And you are kind of one of the companies that are bringing it into the future, into the modern world and beyond, right? 5 million data points in 90 minutes.
Yeah. I think, absolutely. We were founded in 2008 at the time, and it's like our first three clients were Leinster Rugby, Arsenal and Man United. So not a bad three to sort of get going with. But it was a time the likes of Ferguson was just almost blown away by the fact that you could almost record this data and then what it does. Before then, it was all about, as a coach, I know best. It was all about, I know my players more than anybody else. Well, these players now are F1 cars. They are highly tuned athletes, simple as that. So what works for one won't work for another. So basically, everyone's got their own data sets. Everyone knows when they're hitting their maximum levels. Everyone knows when they're at risk of fatigue and injury. So we just provide the data, I say just the data, in terms of what that looks like for the performance team to then use.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that kind of blew my mind at the time. There's a Premier League football team had a higher injury rate than any other Premier League football team, and they changed their head of fitness and conditioning, and the injury rate plummeted. And we were studying this at uni as to why it was, and we were trying to come up with ideas and thoughts as to what the reason was that this guy managed to change their injury rate. And what it was he'd worked in football before. We'd come up with all sorts of theories and concepts and this and the other. And it was as simple as the previous head of fitness had come from working in Olympic sports. Olympians have to peak for a 2-week period or a 1 day or 2 day period. And then they often crash. And if you watch Olympic performances within a couple of weeks of the Olympics, they're often terrible compared to where they were before because they've peaked and they're off the crest of that wave. And the head of sport and performance had brought that thinking to professional football, trying to get athletes at 99, 100% all the time. And they were just breaking. And you're just like, oh, so obvious. But that was that was elite professional football, the richest game in the world in our country at the time. And you're thinking, is that it? Is that as good as it got at the time? So you're revolutionizing how this works, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But to your point there, it's having the staff to be able to interpret that data and making it actionable really as well. So, I mean, not to sort of throw facts out here, but I think it was Wolves about 2 or 3 years ago, whereby they used like 17 outfield players through the season. Well, that's remarkable in terms of how many times they played football. But that was them really using the technology and understanding it. When's my player at risk of injury? When does he optimize it in his performance? But then again, other things around that as well is like we know, when you get Premier League stars, you then go away to international duty, and then their international coaches think that they know best. It sometimes upsets the apple cart as well. That's why you always want to see Premier League doctors and staff travel with their top assets, because they're the ones who have to pick up the pieces after the international breaks. So no, it's it's an ever-changing world, but it's more reliant on data and there's more of it, and it's knowing what to do with it. Like you say, 5 million data points a game, that's fantastic. I don't expect someone sat there going to every 5 million data points, sort of recording it on an Excel spreadsheet, but it's sort of being able to sort of create what's best for that player and that team.
I think the dependency of the game as well is changing. Like if you look at like the Leeds, who play like a high tempo, high press kind of game, the dependency on the player and what they're expected to kind of play that kind of strategy is completely different now too. So the requirements of the individual player physically is transformed over the years since 1998. So this type of technology makes that so much more transparent.
And make it work. So tell us, what's the background to the company? You've two different accents on the call. So where's the headquarters? And how did the company come into being? You said it was founded 2008.
2008, yeah. So our fearless leaders and co-founders, Alan Clarke and Sean O'Connor. So the story goes, basically, they were stood watching Dundalk FC and they said, wouldn't it be good if they could track players? One had an engineering background, one had a sports science background, and it kind of just came together from there, really. So at the time, that was 2008. I think the first client, it was Leinster. They won the European Cup in 2009. So everyone kind of went, what's that little bump on the back? What are they doing that we aren't? And then they managed to get into a small club called Man United and another small club called Arsenal. So after that, they kind of, for the next 10 years, because they were ahead of the game, but also there's other brands out there who imitate us, but we were basically, our technology was the best, the most reliable, the most accurate, FIFA proven, tested, gold mark standards and all that. We organically just kind of grew from there to what it is today in the elite space, which is about, I think it's just touching nearly 800 clubs across 50 countries. So it tells you kind of where we've got to. And that fundamentally, it's the product shit up, if I'm being brutally honest with you. So you're kind of quite ballsy with it. But we continue to develop. You have to evolve with it. Of course you do. Otherwise you get caught up. And then we keep doing that.
Yeah. So from a marketing point of view, and I know you're both hands-on in the marketing world, one of the accusations that's always leveled at marketers when you're working with a shit hot product that's used by Man United, used by Arsenal, that's used by Ukraine and international teams and Leinster's. And it's like, oh, marketing's easy then, isn't it? Like the reason I don't have any hair is that people throw that accusation at you all the time. You know, when it's shit and it's not working, it's your fault. When everything's flying, it's like, oh, you've got an easy job, haven't you? It's not quite absolutely the case, is it?
Yeah, I hear that. I absolutely hear that. I think, like you say, if you break down our model into two sort of business models, the B2B space, which is our elite teams, basically, you could argue the first 10 years, the marketing side of it was very much organic because the product was the best and they're going into a new industry. What we've got now since 2019 going into the B2C space, where basically we've now got the technology that anybody can use, but it's hard because in terms of, number one, you've got a new brand, number one, you've got a new product category. So we're trying to say, this is what it is, this is what it does, and this is why you need it. So that kind of process in terms of telling people what you need to be doing and why you need it, it's a bit of a slog. I mean, coupled with that, I mean, Ryan will tell you from digital world as well, the attention span of people now is next to nothing. Well, in old money, when you're doing B2B, you're allowed a 30-minute presentation and everyone goes, yeah, I get it. Whereas now you've got, 12 seconds to kind of go, this is who we are, this is what it does, this is why you need it. Oh, there's Harry Kane. So it's a case of, it's a real journey that we're on, but we know that people are now getting it, people are understanding it. Yes, you take the flash moments like Ukraine and build things around them. I call them kind of energy moments in terms of what they are, strike while the iron's hot. But we've still got a long way to go in terms of just letting everybody know what it is. So it isn't just this bloke sports bra, which we still get, which we have to take with a pinch of salt and say at least it's something, but it's much more than that. It's hard, but it's brilliant at the same time. It's football. It's the best players in the world. You can't not love it.
And Ryan, you're a rugby player as well, aren't you? And I know from my own experiences playing rugby.
Unofficially retired, I think.
Listen, mate. Don't ever retire. Like I've retired 3 times and keep coming back, and I'm 42 now, and I won't officially retire again. But there's certainly a lot of my ex-colleagues who probably need a sports bra when you think of your average rugby player.
It's a performance
vest. Sorry. Performance vest. So as a sportsman yourself, running the digital marketing element of the company, is it like, are you living the dream? And then how does that boil down to actually, but you've still got a bloody hard job to get into?
Yeah, I think I've always in the past kind of almost like bragged about the fact that I've worked in different companies in different sectors and thought, oh, it's just product X, and like you apply the same kind of methodology and the same approaches, and you can pretty much sell anything. Whereas when I came into STATSports and you're working in an arena where I'm playing the sport, I'm engaging with analysis in sport, and even to an extent I was doing GPS analysis for a team previously. You actually realize that you can, working in sport and doing digital marketing or e-commerce, it's just like an added 10-15%. It just gives you that extra context for if you're going into like a messaging matrix and you're trying to understand the motivations of someone. It just gives you that extra burst. So for me, it's kind of living the dream, and it's kind of like honing into that kind of that niche or that extra understanding that you have that it would take you a lot longer to deep dive into if you're coming fresh in an industry. So yeah, it's helped massively with the learning curve, but it doesn't help necessarily with the nuance of scaling a brand. That's like a next level thing where you're trying to go, right, this is my experience as a guy from Northern Ireland who's playing rugby, but how does that relate to a 16-year-old that's playing on the west coast of America playing soccer, for example? It's completely different persona and completely different motivations. So yes, it helps with the learning curve, but it only takes you so far, you know.
Gotcha. No, and I my first proper marketing job was at Durham County Cricket Club. So working in professional cricket, we had England games, we had concerts, and there was times when you felt like the luckiest person in the world, but then there's other times where you realize you've got the spreadsheet to get ready for the board presentation, and at some point, you know, they're just numbers on a bit of paper, right? It doesn't matter what's going on around it. You've just got to get that board presentation right because your budget next year depends on it, and you know that's where you've got to have that sort of professional integrity to keep pushing through.
I think you can fall in the pitfalls of their assumptions as well from your own experience. So if I'm coming like, oh, I'm a rugby player, I've used this technology before, this is what I think. It can take all like the objectivity out of any data analysis you're doing. So it's like, I think this, and therefore the result is that, where being a lot more sort of, I don't know, like if you're more of an insecure marketer in terms of you're not sort of using your own ego or your own experience per se to dictate what your messaging is going to be, then it makes it a lot easier going into that.
My favorite line as a consultant when I move into working with a new business, people say, I think, I'm like, sorry, I don't care what you think. I really don't. I just don't care what you think. It's not important to the discussion. So you're right about that, being able to check your ego out and actually say, this is what is happening and here's what we can prove, I think is really different. And that's when I always think you see a good marketer when, you know, when they go, it's not about what I think, it's here's what we can prove, or here's what we're testing and things like that. So how did you get into working at STATSport? What was the career path for you, Ryan, to get there into the digital role? And then Ian, I'll come to you with the same question afterwards.
So I went to Queen's University here, and then straight after I graduated, I went to work in an architecture firm in Brooklyn, doing a marketing role there, which was, I'm not going to offend anyone by saying it's the most hipster office I've ever been in my entire life. That's why I got tattoos, yeah, off the back of that one job. I remember one day walking in with a Starbucks cup and like the face, like as if I just murdered someone.
It's true, honestly. You know, worst person in history walking anywhere with a Starbucks mug, to be honest with you.
Yeah, true. I learned the hard way there, but yeah, so worked there as sort of a marketing kind of coordinator role. Came home, worked for Queen's in a digital role, focusing on sort of Southeast Asia market and India and China, doing campaigns there, and then worked for Barclay Group in kind of a SaaS kind of company, and then just the opportunity come up for STATSports. And when you see tech and you see sport combined together, it's kind of something you want to get your teeth into straight away. And just luckily managed to get through a couple of first round interviews and made a mark as a digital marketing executive originally, starting off in STATSports. So
brilliant.
It also helped that Barclay, I thought was Barclays, the bank. So obviously, this guy's all right here. And then he had major decision-making sort of prowess at Barclays. I'm going like, you're only a young lad. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, anyway, no, it's not Barclays, it's Barclay. Oh yeah, of course it is. So it helps. Anyway.
By that time, the ink was dry on the contract and there was no going back.
Too late.
So.
Everything happens for a reason, I say, so happy days.
Absolutely. And what about you, Ian? We haven't actually said what your role is at STATSport, so tell us that and then talk us through, sort of dance us through your CV that got you there.
So Chief Marketing Officer at STATSports, obviously looking after the whole marketing set, but also much more commercially minded as well in terms of routes to the markets and sales channels. Obviously, e-com is a massive one of that, but we look at like third-party retailers, direct sales, etc., etc. Just growing those sales channels and routes to market, basically. how I ended up here in Belfast, I've spent 15 years in sports retail, from a sort of marketing assistant level right up to an international head of marketing at JD Sports. My international role, I was around the world wherever I needed to be. I think we opened in 15 countries in 2 years. I was in that role. But a bit like probably yourself by the sounds of it, I met a girl from Belfast in a Manchester nightclub at 2 a.m. And then 2 kids later, she decided to move home. So that was that really. But no, that said though, I mean, when we first moved over, I was still doing the old role and sort of keeping an eye on things, thinking what's in Northern Ireland for me. And then I've been tracking STATSports anyway. But in terms of sport related, massively growing company, international presence, it ticked the same boxes as my previous employer. So an honour to sort of be part of it, an honour to be part of what we're doing in terms of the accelerated journey that we're on.
I think I'm going to jump in and bang the drum a little bit for Northern Ireland at this stage. So it's nearly 12 years, as you can tell, because I picked the accent up, how long I've been in Northern Ireland. And there is someone who listens to the podcast who emailed me, knows that I'm podcasting from Northern Ireland, who's like, "You've got such a lovely Irish accent." I'm like, this is awful. But anyway, if you're listening, it's not. It's an English. It's fine. Anyway, and I think when I first moved over, I felt this absolute feeling of dread. You know, I'd worked at Durham County Cricket Club and at Newcastle College, got a job at UTV, and then started looking around the rest of the market, thinking, where do I go next? And the answer was nowhere, right? It felt like there was nothing to do and nowhere to go. Over the last decade, there's a lot gone on in Belfast and a lot of change happened there. There's some huge companies coming in. There's some interesting jobs. There's some bigger companies. We still, I think, we don't have the big e-commerce retailers, the like the JD Sports or the headquarters of those sorts of places. But there's a lot more happening in the local market, isn't there? And kind of that's exciting for people living here and for the area in general.
I think so, yeah. And like I was a bit like yourself in terms of when I made this move, I was like, this is the one job I can do in Northern Ireland. I better stick this out. But the more you speak to people, the more you meet people, the more you're around it, you kind of think, you know, the opportunity here is endless. And it really is. Is it in sports? Probably not. But at the same time, the other areas that are really sort of thriving, absolutely. So in I've been working out now just over 3 years. It's in terms of you're much more confident that there's loads more out there for you, which like yourself, when moving over, you're moving over thinking, well, what am I doing here? But at the same time, for us, it's gone in the right direction. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think like the best example of that, I think, is when you see a company that's not just described as like, oh, they're a Northern Irish success story, or they're from our wee country, and it's like, oh, that's Northern Irish. Where you see companies like, I'd like to think STATSports, you see like the Black Box, like on an international stage, these are a big company, and then people might realize secondary that they're actually like HQ is here. So I think that's the best example of like, we're not just insular, like a little small thing and successful for here. It's successful globally. But you see more and more of those companies.
But also the level of talent here shouldn't be undermined as well. So I mean, ASOS have just moved about 150 jobs over here as well from like a sort of software development piece. So there's something happening here that's obviously of benefit to those large companies. And don't blame them.
Definitely. And just to pick up on your point, and I'm only going to say this then move on, because the whole, oh, good for we Northern Ireland boils my piss. That mentality just drives me.
Absolutely.
You know, like New Zealand's got 4 million people and is a world leader in cricket and 2 forms of rugby and various other things. Don't tell me that having a small population means we should just be happy with turning up at an event. It's like, no, you come to win. Don't just turn up to be part of it and go, oh, isn't it nice we did this? So that annoys the hell out of me. Anyway, last thing on recruitment, and then we'll get back to talking about the business. Are you still recruiting at the minute? You've got a head of marketing role available. Is that still live at the moment?
Yes, it is. We've got a number of roles, to be honest with you. I think we're recruiting about between 15 and 20 at the moment. We've got a head of marketing role. That's more from working alongside Ryan, really, in terms of sort of campaign delivery and the kind of sort of above the line media requirements from there as well, because I'm sort of jumping into that commercial side more and more, just to try and drive those sales. So that's a huge opportunity, and there's loads throughout the company as well. Like I say, at the moment, like I'm sure everyone's the same, we've grown that much as remote workers. The moment we may go back into the office, we're all going to need fucking mezzanine desks or bunk beds. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how much we've grown during the last sort of 12 to 24 months. So yeah, on the
stuff. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes to the jobs. if you do want to, I think the head of marketing role's been open for a little bit. So if that it does interest you, get in quick, because it'll probably be closing if you don't listen to this fairly quickly. Anyway, moving on from there.
So referral fee there as well. Have you got your own referral?
Yeah, please.
I'm no worries.
Same as a recruitment consultant. I think 25% of year one salary. So please quote strategy sessions. Listen, it's a verbal contract, lads. You've already signed it. So let's talk B2B first of all. In terms of what's the growth plans? Are you looking to more football teams, new sports? Are you getting out of? You seem to have a bit of a speciality in football at the minute, but you're obviously in rugby as well. What's the growth plan for that B2B side of the business?
It's basically any elite sports team around the world, essentially. I suppose what we've managed to do over the last kind of probably 5 years as well. The technology when it first came in, it was the best of the best, which is why the top teams in the world used it. So whilst we've got the majority of the Premier League, we've got what was it? The top 4 rugby nations at the moment are all ours. We've just signed the New York Yankees. We've just got 3 NFL teams, which is all fantastic. There's obviously a huge gap in between that in terms of still elite sports persons. So what we then brought out is more technology to sort of be able to provide what they need, whether it's the level of detail or the price point. We're now going after, if you are an elite sports team, we're basically going after you, simple as that. We specialise in outdoor sports because of the GPS functionality on it. So that's what we're going after. There's obviously going to be a finite number of people, a finite number of teams that there are, but at the same time, there's still a lot to go at because take football, for example. Yeah, the Premier League get it, Championship get it, League One, League Two, maybe getting it. Take that around the world and everyone's in the same boat. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's taking that time to sort of filter down. So the opportunities in that space is still going. Even down to, I had a conversation with some lacrosse organisation over in the US. Well, straight away, yeah, of course it is. It's an opportunity.
Yeah, and lacrosse is a different league over there compared to here. It just seems to be a couple of posh kids at university running around, whereas over there it's a major event.
Of course it is.
So just touching on the USA, you've got Paul McAfee leading the, and I laugh when I say his name. I went to uni with Paul. I haven't seen him since 2001, so I can't pretend that we're best mates. So hello, Paul, if you're listening. But you've got an office in the US leading the US expansion. I presume that's just based on the size of the market over there is infinitely bigger than the size of the market in most of the places.
Yeah, well, President Paul, as we call him now, because he's the president of America, so that's where he's just STATSports. There we go.
I bet he wanted you to call him President Paul.
No.
Officially changed his name.
No, yeah, so we've got offices over in Chicago, and again, it's just taking the opportunity that's there. If you take the NWSL, we've got a league-wide deal. I think we've got 16 of the MLS teams. NFL, we've got 3 teams. We just picked up the Major League Baseball accreditation system last year, so we've got 3 MLB teams. And then below all that, you've then got the NCAA setup, which it's a monster. It's an absolute monster. And the more you dig into it and the more you read about it, it is a beast. Ryan sent me a podcast on the NFL last week in terms of what's the NFL worth, 11 billion compared to the Premier League is 5 billion. Now the Premier League's pretty big. So for the NFL to be more than twice the size of the Premier League, just tells you the sort of scale that we're going after.
When you get into, I'm just looking for it here, see if I can find it. But when you get into talking about the size of college sports in America, I think maybe most people listening have an understanding of it. But college sport in America is at a different level to anything you've experienced. What I'm looking for here is the biggest sports stadiums in the world, because something like 4 of the top 10 belong to college teams, don't they?
All those, yeah. Well, that'll be the Oklahoma Stadium, I think it is. You talk about or the Michigan State one, which is
so I've just Michigan. Yes, I've just found India opened a new cricket stadium in Ahmedabad, named after the president last year, in fact. So that's the biggest now, 132,000. There's one in North Korea, 114,000.
Allegedly.
Can't imagine there'll be a lot of international sport taking place there.
We've got a really nice CAD design to show it off.
Ta-da! And then after that, you've got Michigan, which is for Michigan Wolverines. You've got Beaver Stadium in Pennsylvania for Penn State, Nittany Lions football, Columbus, Ohio, their college team, College Field in Texas, Knoxville, Tennessee, Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. All of these are college football. So out of the top 10, all but 3 are American college sports. It's insane. And that's a market you're just moving into now, and that's how big it is.
Yeah, again, starting again in soccer. We've got North Carolina, which is like the women's soccer team that you want. Then through the Soccers, and then into the Div 1 kind of football, which obviously is American football, what we would say. So yeah, the opportunity is just there. But then again, take a step back from there, even the high schools, the facilities at these high schools as well is just, it is second to none. It is Premier League kind of facilities for a high school. I mean, they do take their sport seriously, but in terms of, as we all do, but in terms of the funding and what's in place for it all, it is second to none. There was something passed in the early 90s, I think it's called Title IX, and it's all about kind of like equality, which is great. Outside the big four of football, basketball, baseball and hockey, if you give men X number of sports scholarships, you need to give women the same number of sports scholarships. So again, take example, US women's soccer. They are by far the best team in the world and probably about 10 years ahead of everybody else because they've had those facilities and training right from the early ages, which is fantastic for the sport. And you sort of look at what those American ladies are doing, they're absolute world beaters by a mile.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So go on, Ryan, sorry.
So I was going to say the American market as well, even from like a broadcast perspective, the way they consume data in sport is completely different to how we do it over here. I think we're catching up, but there is an appetite for data that is completely like next level, from scouting right through to broadcast. So it just lends itself to our product really well. And I think that paired with the opportunity of the volume of players that are playing, plus the size of the pockets as well with some of the sport, and especially in soccer, I think it's a good recipe for an opportunity there for us.
Which almost as if you read my notes, you've managed to segue from the B2B and help me land the plane on the B2C side of the field. So
thanks.
It's I know you're easy at this. You're an expert.
It's his first podcast. He loves
it. Yeah.
It's not your first rodeo, is it? So, talk to me about that. So you've got this professional product that people have been wearing, and then where did the idea come from to sell it out to just the punter on the street? And maybe talk us through the Arsenal example as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to start off there, basically, again, the owners in 2019, I think it was, kind of said this technology needs to be made available for everybody. It's one of those, it's that kind of FOMO, the best players in the world are using it, why can't I use it? So we brought out the technology. It's not 250 metrics, it's 16 metrics. And just giving the kids, the sort of grassroots players, the amateurs, the chance to use the technology to effectively improve the game in terms of get yourself get yourself faster, get yourself fitter.
If it's get yourself fatter, can you send me one? I'm in for
it. No problem. But in terms of just going from there. So I mean, again, and it's no mean feat to try and that product education. This guy to my left here was very much key to that in terms of using the digital marketing tools at his disposal and then growing them. So over to you, Ryan, I think as well.
Yeah, I think it's bringing that core technology from the elite game and using the trust factors associated with that and those elite teams and democratizing that data and putting it in the hands of the everyday sort of player, which is what we're trying to achieve. Now, there's strengths and weaknesses to having that elite alignment where some people then associate with the product with being only with elite. Yeah. I'm not at that level yet, which means that it's not for me, which is a hard product positioning piece. Yeah. There's also an issue with, not necessarily an issue, but a challenge with the data and the level of data and trying to decide this is what an elite sports scientist needs and this is what an everyday player needs, and how do you present that data in a way that can create the right outcome for those individual personas. I think that's been part of our challenge and our learnings over the last couple of years. The great thing about having great ambassadors is, for me, it's a great stop the scroll. You put Harry Kane's face on an ad that goes out on Instagram and you're going to stop the scroll. However, how do you educate the customer that this isn't just a product for Harry Kane, this is a product for a 16-year-old that's trying to break into an academy or someone that's injury ridden and is trying to get more pitch time. So there's a massive education piece. And I think from a consumer point of view, we've quite a long buying cycle. So it takes our customers approximately a month and around 4 touch points to educate someone before, from a brand knowledge point of view, right through to transaction. So there is a lot of education that's needed in that process. And for us, we've been trying to hone in on how do we answer the right questions or give the right answers in that process to shorten that almost.
So keep talking then. What were the tactics that you used to help with that, to educate people before you moving them through to purchase?
I think accepting, probably there's a couple of things we needed to accept. We had to accept that we weren't doing a one and done. It wasn't a Mad Men campaign where you do a TV ad and you persuade them and you put all your features and benefits out there, and then they'll absorb 30 seconds of a TVC and they'll buy your product in one go. It's accepting that, yes, we have shorter touch points, but we have 4 of them approximately. So our education can be sequential. So we give them different bites of what they need or what we think that they need based on their intent at that level. So I think that one of the turning points for me for our campaigns was we went down to the Facebook offices in Dublin, and they were showing us a Nielsen study that they did, the joint study, and they were doing a study into the attention, not necessarily attention span, but the time frame it takes for someone to ascertain value from an ad or from a video. And they were able to say that within 3 seconds, 37% of people ascertained the value of that ad, and within 7 seconds, 74% have ascertained the value of that ad, which means that our lovely 1 minute long video that has 50 features and all these benefits and everything were essentially redundant because people weren't going to make it to the end. They were ascertaining the value very early. So we broke down those messages into what is the most simple way of answering the question, why would I buy this? And then we A/B tested the shit out of it basically and found the best messages. So yeah, it's a long education process, but it was finding the right messages at the right time, I guess, was the main element of that.
I remember having sorry, go on, Ian.
I think just the other thing to add to that as well, just in terms of that sort of B2C space, is kind of like at the elite level, they've all got sports scientists to interpret that data in terms of this is what it means and these are what the actions are. Whereas right from the start of this project, we were just giving these kids data, which after 3 weeks they're going, right, this is my speed, how do I get quicker? So we're on an assault charge now for content from influencers, from ambassadors, from elite sports teams to sort of plug that gap in terms of, well, this is how you become quicker. This is how you become more physically fit. So that's that piece of it. And then certainly from Ryan's world, and well, any of us as marketeers, we've got there's a real balance to strike here in terms of, yes, it's football, which 50% of the population love, but only 3.5% play it. So in terms of everything that we're doing in terms of messaging and marketing, it's trying to reduce that wastage. Now, there'll be uncles and dads within that who have got sons, of course, they're out. But in terms of to try and hit that 3.5% that play the game is tough, is really tough. And then couple that with when you have assets that we've got. I mean, Ryan does a great job in terms of just filtering out just the fans, if that makes sense. Because again, you put Raheem Sterling on, it's the easiest job for this guy to drive traffic to the website, easy. But to the website with intent to buy, different world entirely. So Ryan does a really good job at sort of filtering that out and then retargeting accordingly. Because again, the best players in the world use it and advertise it. Brilliant. We still need to go, this is what it does. These are the benefits.
The best example of that, and it's probably the worst ad that I've ever ran, was we got Ronaldo posted organically on his own Instagram channel, millions and millions of followers, like 400 million followers or something.
Biggest ever Instagram account now, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly. Just overtaken somebody.
Million views the video, didn't it, of just using our products.
With us wearing our vest, using the product, with us having no knowledge of it, although we did take credit for it afterwards as if it was pre-planned. But,
absolutely.
We cut that up, put it in the ad, and put it out, and I think we got 9,000 sessions within the first couple of hours of that ad. But the level of buying intent afterwards, but the ad was just eye-catching, drag people on the site. And you could say from a pure funnel approach, okay, all these people are on the site, there's bound to be some conversion, but the efficiency of moving someone from an awareness piece to considering buying, which we would define as, say, an add to basket, there was very little coming through, which means that we just spent a load of money dragging a load of sessions of Ronaldo fans on the site, and it was almost a waste. So on the surface, looks like a success, but when you actually look underneath and see where is there buying intent, then there's virtually none. So that was one of the learnings for us, to say it's very easy to do this, but can we get them to show buying intent after?
That's really, I think it's a really interesting story, because it goes back to that bit I said at the beginning about, everyone thinks your job's easy, right? Yeah, you got Ronaldo, you got Harry Kane, you got Raheem Sterling. Why couldn't everyone could sell this? You can't, actually. It takes the skill to be able to refine, to chisel, to mine the data, to find the people who are interested and get them through as quickly as you can.
Yeah, it is.
What lessons?
I totally agree.
Sorry.
Sorry, so I thought you were like to say, because essentially this is a pod which is about 2.5 inches by about an inch that goes into the back of that performance vest that then transmits that data through to your phone. You try and explain that, do you know what I mean? It's like, it looks like a pager from 1996 when you look at the actual pod on its own. So you can't put a picture of the pod up because everyone goes, what's that? And then you just put the vest up and they go, is it just the vest? So the job that we are doing and continuing to do, and getting some serious success from it, is just sort of strip it right back, like Ryan says.
Yeah, keep the messaging simple. It is. Someone said to me recently, you're throwing too many tennis balls at people, and it's hard to catch. Throw one tennis ball, people can catch it. Throw 10, they don't know which one to catch, and they just miss the whole point. And I was told that 3 weeks ago, I must have used it about 45 times in meetings with various people.
So there you go.
46, there we go. But it's just such a real clarity of it. Just cut it down, throw one ball, catch it, throw another one, and just keep building that way.
But also as well, like certainly in Ryan's world as well, in terms of what the technologies for marketing now allow us to do that, in terms of gone are the days of just the big billboard and a TVC. The technologies are there to do it. I mean, Ryan touched on the US there. I was over in New York a few weeks back, understanding how they consume television, and like connected TV and platforms and all this coming out of everything that's coming from the US. It's only going to hit here in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a digital marketer's dream in terms of like how you can sort of buy that advertising space. Sky recently last year in the UK, you can basically buy ads of people who are streaming Sky through their PS5s and Xboxes. Well, instinctively, that tells you it's a youth market. So it's kind of like all the big kind of advertisers are really sort of giving you the tools to be able to hit those target markets. Yeah,
brilliant stuff. So how do you build your campaigns around, say, key buying cycles like Black Friday or Christmas, or other January fitness goals? Do you use those to drive the consumer side of the business?
Yeah, I think Black Friday, like most people,
you love it and hate it at the same time, don't you?
It's the biggest. It is game day. It's the biggest stress of your life, and then you're almost like begging for it to be over, and then you kind of miss it when it's gone because the hype's gone a little bit. So it's love-hate relationship. But no, we are still a massive gifting product around Christmas, and Black Friday plays a massive part in that. We're quite a high AOV for our particular vertical as well. So a discount does respond quite well in that market. How you build a campaign leading into that is basically, because we know we have a large education period in the lead up, we're essentially using October to bring as many people on the site and educate them and not worry about the conversion element of it just as much. As long as we're bringing through those 2, 3, 4 touch points to educate them, we know that when we press the button on a Black Friday campaign, it's going to be click to buy. It's going to be the persuasion's already done, and it's almost the conversion period then. And even our creative completely changes going into those periods. Like in October, we've got a lot of video content that's out, a lot of educational content, and then Black Friday, you're talking very simple, like majority static. Here's Harry Kane's face. Here's the price proposition. Buy now. It's very, very simple. So I think we build those pots up from a remarketing perspective, education perspective, and then we just start chopping them out when we get into the sale period.
And do you have that moment as you start to cry sometime in October, where you start to looking at your cost of your ads just going in this awful peak?
You don't cry at that
thinking,
you spend it, don't you?
I cry quietly alone in bed. No, there is. We do have like a little amber period where you can see some turning points in terms of people it's a checkout completion rate, I think, is where you start to see people going, oh, do you know what? I might just hold off and wait for the sale to drop instead. Mm-hmm. And an element of it is having faith in the process of, you've done the education, you've got people to a certain point, and they're waiting for that trigger to kind of complete it off. It's a harder sell into finance, but we have a process the last couple of years. It's worked.
Everything's a hard sell into finance when you're in marketing, though. Everything's a hard sell.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'll say nothing.
Depends how you sell it.
So Ian, with your CMO hat on, Ian, how do you juggle the competing pressures of managing the brand, the STATSports brand that you are, selling to your everyday footballer, your weekend warrior, as well as, going on sale in the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, while also trying, positioning STATSports as this elite brand that has to sit there in the conversations with Man United and Ronaldo and things like that. What are the challenges you have to deal with in that space?
I suppose a lot of the challenges for me is that it's that balance, isn't it, between brand and performance? And it's one of those, I know it's a bit of an obvious answer, but no one's got the right answer for it. And if we did, we'd all be more high paid jobs as we are. From Ryan's performance head, sometimes he will question what I'm doing, don't you, Ryan?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. But at the same time, it is totally my responsibility just in terms of those, what I call key energy moments for those sports. We need to be around it. So whether that is the start of season, whether that is a major tournament, it's up to us to ride that wave and sort of increase our awareness. I mean, take the Euros. Like, yes, the Ukraine moment was fantastic, but I mean that campaign was starting planning from like the previous year, just in terms of getting ready for it. We knew we had the assets, a little bit of luck along the way. Like Maguire scored, Sterling scored, Kane scored, all our assets scored. England got to the final, but at the same time, it's just making sure that we are visible at the right moments in that premium facility, and then also buying media tactically where you can to sort of get around your audience in the most cost-efficient manner, to then let this guy take over when they've sort of come into our ecosystem. I mean, I'm wanting to get the best traffic possible into our websites or our social channels, so this guy can take over on the retargeting. The other side of that is, if you look at then the sort of retailer conversations that we have. I mean, we're in some pretty big retailers now. I think we've got 3 kind of shopping shops on Oxford Street in London, the busiest shopping street in Europe. And that's because we have good content and we have evergreen content as well. We're not like your Nike or Adidas who change the product every 12 weeks with a new colorway. We've got the best players in the world that can sit in those retailers all year round. They love it, we love it, and it's only adding to it. I mean, those stores on Oxford Street, it's talking about a million people a year footfall. That isn't bad for the brand. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I might not sell quite as many as what the website can do, but I've got to measure that kind of intent and the time of the year and the energy moments around it to make sure I'm where I need to be.
I think to build on that as well, like before starting at STATSports, I would have always come in with a performance head of like,
he still does.
This is what your return on ad spend is. This is what we efficiently spend. Whereas Ian's a massive advocate of the marketing mix approach and having multiple touch points. You want to exist and have content where the customer exists, and that's completely changed my mindset to an extent on how you approach marketing in that perspective. And I think a key example of it is once you turn off the tap and some of that brand marketing piece, that top of funnel, yes, you don't see the knock-on effect in terms of sales short term, but then long term you start to see, if you're not creating that education piece long term, you start to see those sales sort of fall away. And I think there was a piece in Marketing Week from Adidas where I think they got in and then they switched up their balance of brand versus performance and went fully short term and completely trashed their sales long term because they had the short term approach. And I think there is a balance in that between where you can efficiently spend and attribute sales, but you need that brand aspect to it. Otherwise, it's going to make my life a lot harder, I guess.
I think to add to that as well, it's that kind of, when you talk about peaks and troughs, you've got the kind of the consumer's peaks and troughs around when there's the gift giving period. I mean, back in my old world, it was Easter, back to school and Christmas, whereas this one is pretty much just Christmas. But then you've got the peaks and troughs of the sporting calendar. So like we're going into 2022, we've got the World Cup at Christmas. Like this is just blowing people's minds in terms of like as an opportunity what it is for the sports industry, but then also making sure it isn't a massive red herring. If you go back to, I was around London 2012 for the Olympics, everyone thought there'd be this massive sports boom. There kind of wasn't. People just like buying Union Jacks in London, going down Oxford Street. That was kind of all those shops that sell like the red buses and all that. They made hay. The sports didn't really make hay off it, even though the greatest show on earth was in town. I think the interesting thing as well, when you speak about the brand and performance piece, it always makes me laugh as a CMO when it gets to January and everybody tries to take success for it. So if you speak to the PR agency, oh, it's because of us, speak to influencers, oh, it's because of us, oh, it's TV, oh, it's because of us, which is all great, but it's that mix of you're all in it together, let's all move forward together. So it just makes you laugh. Like anything like sort of social growth, everyone will try and take it as it's their responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility.
Brilliant. I am going to take the clip of Ryan, performance marketer moving to loving brand marketing. That's going to be the clip that we use to promote.
I think delete that straight away. I just
not a chance
on the line here.
It's only
not a chance. No, it'd be interesting. I'm going to maybe get him back on the podcast on his own and then see what he really says. Performance marketing. We do everything. It's none of that brand. All that brand shit. It's all us. We do all the hard work. So, you told me you'd never ask that. So. So I want to kind of jump back to sort of some of the PR/brand work that you get as well, because I want to link to it in the show notes about the Football Focus piece that happened. Was it Football Focus or was it Match of the Day?
Which one?
You're on the mall. It was the one where it went into the Arsenal Academy and they had the...
Oh, yeah. It was on... there was a BBC Click piece that we did. So, yeah, the Arsenal deal was the kind of... Again, the owners have been planning this and plotting this for a number of years. We always talk about joining the dots between the elite and the consumer. This is the first one that does that. This is the real kind of selling the sizzle in terms of the Arsenal first team use it. You can use the same technology. You can compare yourself to the academy players based on age, position, and gender. You can compare yourself against the top players if you want to. And then ultimately that data is then shared with Arsenal Football Club. So if you're hitting the right stats, there's no reason why they can't bring you in for the trial. In terms of the perfect kind of idea for a campaign and joining the dots between the elite space and the consumer space, that's it in terms of, wow, that really, right, I get it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Per Mertesacker was on there. Is he in charge of the Arsenal Academy?
He's the academy director, and again, he was using our technology as a player as well. So he was saying on it, and this is where, what did they say about a professional sports person? It's a case of it's talent, it's mindset, and it's physical attributes. Get those three right, and you've nailed it. If one of those drops, the other two will suffer. So we are a massive part of that in terms of the development of elite athletes.
Has there been any examples of maybe young players strapping their STATSports performance vest onto the dog to get kind of the top speeds up so that they're...
You do that, don't you?
No, mine are all legit.
I'm not sure about that. But again, because the human body can only go so fast, we put a cap on it in terms of like, because I mean, I've done it myself. You keep your pod and drive off, and you think you're going 30 miles an hour, but the pod recognises the fact that no human can go this fast, if that makes sense. So that's fine.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And that Arsenal piece is a really, again, it's in the show notes, hopefully, but it's a really great example of the B2B and the B2C worlds combining together. And I take it, are you looking for more deals like that in different markets and with different clubs?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say the clubs, but we started with Arsenal, who are a big brand, but we're speaking to...
Is it Donegal Rugby Club?
No, I don't think it is, in fairness.
Well, as soon as you launch the partnership with the D, we'll publicise it.
That's the Great White Buffalo right there. That's the
absolutely. Talks are ongoing because, I mean, like I say, it sparks interest for those commercial departments, doesn't it? Oh, what's this? New revenue stream. So, yeah.
And just to kind of wrap up where you mentioned revenue streams, so to bring it back, for the consumer part of the world, are you a product business, a bit like a Fitbit where you sell the product and that's it? Or is it more of a SaaS model where there's an ongoing kind of dive in to keep hold of all the data and more analytics access?
I think right now it is that kind of hardware, which is what we are. However, where it's going to go in the next 12 to 24 months, nobody knows. There's a million ways of skinning it. Yes, we've got data. Yes, there's a potential subscription product available within our industry, or yes, we can sell it outright. I just think, like I say, we've all come out of lockdown as well. The fitness industry per se, the kind of fitness, whatever you want to call it, is it's going to twist and turn a lot over the next 12 months, and there's going to be harsh lessons from certain industries that think they've nailed it and they haven't. Simple as that. Like we're going into a completely new world. No one's going to predict what's happening this time next year. I think it would be foolish to say we're going to do X because the world's going to be Y.
I read Professor Scott Galloway, who is an interesting character. I don't know if you've come across him or you read him. He's very American and very bullish on his opinions, even when he's not right. But he is right a lot of the time. But one of the things he talks about is about the share prices of the big companies, the Apples, the Amazons, and things like that. And he dives into it and looks at basically the only thing a lot of their shareholders care about isn't actually revenue, it's about growth. So when you start to boil it down and you look at where can they grow, the markets that they are dominant in, there's not really any growth. And there's only a few areas where they can go into, and healthcare is a big one. And, and Google bought Fitbit, and moving in sort of healthcare and fitness and that sort of area, there's rumors Amazon are going to buy Peloton. the big companies are moving aggressively into the fitness space, which same reason they're going into TV and entertainment, and the same reason they're going into education and different areas. Because they're probably the only categories that can go in and get the sort of growth that they're after. Military as well, actually, and they're all bidding for a massive US military contract. So there's elements of that there, and that will fundamentally change the industry you're in, won't it? That when the Amazons, Facebooks, and Apple start weighing in seriously into that industry, everything changes, doesn't it? And that's an exciting and terrifying thing at the same time, is it?
I think it's exciting and hugely terrifying. Yeah, I mean the only thing to add to that, and this is about blowing our own trumpet, which we are. I mean, if you take the Worldwide Developers Conference for Apple last year, our product was on it in terms of when in the elite space of putting the technology to the watch. Apple were like, I don't know how you do that. How have you got that data into a cloud and down to a watch in real time? They were blown away by it. And then even down to like back in, I think it was 2015, I think we worked with Nike to develop the first female football boot. So like the big boys know who we are and we know who they are. And I think we take reassurance from that in terms of we're still best in class. You know what I mean? Yeah. In terms of all the finances they've got, we're still best in class. And we say it all the time, like Nike could bring this thing out tomorrow. Of course they could. But you look at, we're on like the 8th evolution of the kind of hardware and software. You saw what Nike did with golf clubs in terms of they just couldn't do it. In terms of like, you can't just come in and just own a market. You saw I did have to do it with my coach in about 2013. It didn't work. Do you know what I mean? So we've got to take some confidence from that we know what we're doing and our technology works, unlike some others.
Yeah, excellent. So that's the second clip we'll use. Ian Forrester says we're better than Nike, and then I'll just clip that up, edit it slightly. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, as we get to the end of the podcast, I ask the same sort of questions to every guest. So, Ryan, I'll throw at you first. Where do you go to keep on top of what's changing in marketing? Where are you a reader, a blogger, a podcaster? Where do you pick your information up from?
Probably a mix. I think over lockdown, massively got into podcasts. I think trying to go on walks for my own sanity, probably added to that a little bit. Yeah, always been a big reader, and then Twitter for all the pitfalls of Twitter from a general societal point of view. Wow. Twitter in the marketing and e-com space is actually incredibly valuable, and if you follow the right people, then you can get a huge amount of value, and people can be very transparent as well on that platform. So,
and any podcasts you'd recommend other than this fabulous one? Anyway,
the Strategy Sessions podcast. It's just this, isn't it?
It's just this.
One of the finest. One of the finest. Yeah.
I like the Business Breakdowns podcast.
Yeah.
It comes from maybe more of an investor point of view, but it's a good background. There's one on Peloton recently that broke down kind of it was before they released that statement on why the CEO was terrible. But it was a nice breakdown in their growth and their purchasing patterns for that type of stuff. Yeah, stuff like that would primarily what I'd be listening to. There's a couple of good e-com ones out there that I can't think off the top of my head. And then this one, of course.
Absolutely, this one.
Books wise, Thinking Fast and Slow is probably, I would recommend that to any person in e-com, to be honest. I think that's like a staple. And then I've just finished the book Traction at the minute with Gino Wickman.
Sounds like a thriller.
Traction, yeah, it's yeah. Is it up there?
It's up there. Yeah. It's not been read. That's just, there's a lot of intelligent looking books up there, so people go.
I thought that was a green screen. I didn't know that they were real.
No. There is actually Viz's Profanisaurus over in the corner as well, just there. So they're not all intelligent books. So let's move on from that.
Yeah,
it's the Dictionary of Profanity is what it is, which is, anyway, move on quickly. So Traction. Let's do that. And Ian, what about you?
What, in terms of books I've read, or how I sort of keep on top of everything?
How do you stay on top of what's changing?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, number one, I am a sports nut. I mean, it doesn't kind of go without saying. So I consume sport, every type of sport. And in this industry, obviously it helps. And I think in terms of what I'll kind of do is there's certain companies, there's certain buzzwords that if I see it in the news, I'm going to read further on it. So there isn't a particular pattern that I sort of keep week to week. But listen, you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram, you're reading the newspapers, you're reading the website. Something will sort of catch your eye, and then I'll sort of go into a little bit of a black hole reading about it, and then layer onto the top of that the sort of business of sport, because I mean it is the business of sport. It keeps us very, very much busy. Yeah, that's what I kind of look at in terms of books. Really, again, I'll be honest with you, I'm a big, massive one for sports autobiographies, just in terms of people's how they've done it, how they become the best in the world, and you look at the traits that they've got, it's mind blowing. You know what I mean? A lot of the sort of the new digital stuff, I rely on this guy to send me a WhatsApp saying, listen to this, and that keeps me abreast of everything.
Have you? I stopped reading sports autobiographies. I'll not name the person. It was a very famous cricketer's autobiography, and I'm a massive fan of this cricketer. And I read the autobiography, and it was.
Tell us who it is now. You can't stop at that.
It was Devon Malcolm. It was one of the most. But you guys are history. It's called, and it's a whole book that could well have been 3 paragraphs, right? You're just like, oh my goodness, this is just not that interesting. And after that, I was like, I can't read sports autobiographies anymore. And I think the only other one I've read since then was Peter Crouch, which is it's sort of an autobiography, but yeah, he's
more just a bit of crack in it. It's like I just read James Haskell's and like love him or loathe him, but like he's just a lad on the piss, and that's quite funny. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, a bit of banter about him. So brilliant stuff. And then my last question to both of you: are there any questions you usually get asked on podcasts that I haven't asked today?
Did he mention the bra? I think he mentioned the bra, didn't he?
I think he said bra several times.
I think he did, yeah. That's the normal one we get, yeah.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I'm nothing if not popular, but we'll get the picture of Ryan in the bra for the podcast promo picture.
That was a private one just for you, Andy. Actually,
shit. Sorry. No, good stuff. Well, listen, Ian, Ryan, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with the future. Cheers.
Brilliant.
Cheers. Thank you.